Chapter 1. For his good, Conradin was 10 years old. He lived with Mrs. de Ropp, who was his cousin and guardian. One day, Mrs. de Ropp called a doctor because Conradin was always sick. The doctor came and examined him. "This boy will only live another 5 years, said the doctor. "I agree," said Mrs. de Ropp. "He is such an ill little boy." The doctor's opinion wasn't important to Conradin, but Mrs. de Ropp's was very important. She represented that large part of Conradin's world that was unpleasant, necessary, and real. The other smaller part of his world was represented by his imagination, his only defense against Mrs. de Ropp. One day, thought Conradin, I'm certain that I'll lose this war against her. Tomorrow will be like today. I'll take my medicine at 9 o'clock. I won't play in the garden. I'll go to bed at 7 o'clock. Every day I'll do these things, and in the end I'll die. For the moment, however, Conradin continued to fight his battle, with imagination as his only weapon. Mrs. de Ropp did not admit to herself that she disliked Conradin, but she was probably aware that she took pleasure in stopping him from playing for his good. Conradin hated her, but he was able to hide this hate. He enjoyed his few pleasures very much because he knew that Mrs. de Ropp did not approve. There was a garden behind the house, but Conradin never played there. He knew that one of the windows of the house would open, and he would hear Mrs. de Ropp shout, "Conradin, come and take your medicine." Or, "Conradin, come inside now, it's too cold. Do you want to get ill?" So Conradin went to a shed in a far corner of the garden. This shed was his place of refuge. It was in part a cathedral and in part a playroom. Conradin's imagination had filled the shed with hundreds of interesting phantoms, but there were also two real living creatures. One of these was a hen, to which Conradin gave all of his affection. He had no one else. And in the back of the shed, there was a large hutch. This was the home of a large polecat ferret. Conradin was terribly afraid of this beast with sharp teeth, but it was his most treasured possession. It was also his secret from the woman, which was his own private name for Mrs. de Ropp. And one day he invented a fantastic name for the beast, Sredni Vashtar, and it became his god and religion. The woman also had her religion, and she took Conradin to her church once a week. But the woman's religion was not his. Every Thursday, Conradin worshipped his god. He brought it red flowers and red fruit because Sredni Vashtar was an impatient god that would not like the slow, boring rituals of the woman's religion. And on special festivals, he brought nutmeg to his god, and it was essential that the nutmeg was stolen from the kitchen of the woman. These festivals were not regular. They were held to celebrate something special that happened. For example, once Mrs. de Ropp had a horrible toothache for 3 days, and Conradin celebrated for 3 days. He almost believed that Sredni Vashtar had caused the woman's terrible pain. Unfortunately, the woman noticed that he spent a lot of time in the shed. It is not good for him to be there all the time. I'm going to tell the gardener to take away his hen. Then there will be no reason for him to go to the shed, she thought. Chapter 2. Baptiste. The next day at breakfast, Mrs. de Ropp turned to Conradin and said, "Yesterday the gardener took your hen away and sold it." She waited for him to say something to become angry. Then she could explain why the chicken was taken away for his good. But Conradin said nothing. Perhaps Mrs. de Ropp felt a little guilty, because at tea that afternoon there was toast on the table. Normally, Conradin was not permitted to eat toast, even though it was his favorite food. This time, however, he did not eat the toast. "I thought you liked toast," she said. "Sometimes," said Conradin. In the shed that evening, he changed his manner of worshiping the ferret. Before this, he had only praised his God. Now he asked it for a favor. "Do one thing for me, Sredni Vashtar." The thing was not specified, but Sredni Vashtar was a god, and so he knew. Conradin looked at the place where the chicken had lived and almost cried. Then he went back to the world he hated. And every night in the darkness of his bedroom, and every evening in the shed, Conradin said the same thing. "Do one thing for me, Sredni Vashtar." Mrs. de Ropp saw that Conradin continued to go to the shed. One day she decided to see why. "What do you keep in that hutch?" she asked. "I think you have some guinea pigs. I will tell the gardener to take them away." The woman then went to Conradin's bedroom to find the key to the hutch. When she found it, she went directly to the hutch to complete her discovery. From a window of the dining room, Conradin could see the door of the shed. He saw that the woman entered. He imagined that she was opening the door of the sacred hutch and trying to see what was hidden inside. Perhaps she would put her hand inside. Conradin said his prayer for the last time, but he knew as he prayed that he did not really believe that the polecat ferret was a god. "I'm sure that she will come out in a minute," Conradin thought, with the hutch in her hand. "She will have a smile on her face. I hate her smile. Then she will call the gardener and tell him to take away my wonderful God, who is not even a real God. She will win because she always wins, and I will grow sicker and sicker. And she will be right, and the doctor will be right, and I will die." Conradin began to sing loudly to his God. Sredni Vashtar went forth. His thoughts were red thoughts, and his teeth were white. His enemies called for peace, but he brought them death. Sredni Vashtar the Beautiful. And then he stopped singing and went near the window. He could see that the door of the shed was still open. Time went very slowly, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but it went. He watched the birds in the garden. They flew in little groups from tree to tree. He counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he counted them again. A maid came in with the table for tea, and still Conradin watched. Minutes were moving, and there was hope for the first time. Perhaps victory was near. He started singing again. Sredni Vashtar went forth. His thoughts were red thoughts, and then he saw what he wanted to see. The long yellow and brown beast came out from the shed into the bright sunlight. Its fur was dark with blood. Conradin fell on his knees. The great polecat ferret went to a small stream in the garden. It drank, crossed a little bridge, and then vanished. "Tea is ready," said the maid. "Where is Mrs. de Ropp?" "She went down to the shed a half an hour ago," said Conradin. The maid left the room to call Mrs. de Ropp. When she had gone, Conradin opened a drawer, pulled out a toasting fork, and started to toast a piece of bread. While he was toasting the bread and putting enormous quantities of delicious butter on it, he listened to the noises that came from downstairs. He heard the maid screaming, people running in and out, and finally he heard men carrying some heavy object into the house. Then he heard the maid say, "Who will tell the boy the terrible news?" "I can't. Oh, it's just too horrible." And while the servants debated the matter, Conradin made himself another piece of toast. Chapter 1. A Great Discovery. Lady Blemley knew that her house party was going to be difficult to organize because it would continue for several days and the guests would have to sleep in her large house. She always tried to invite guests who were talented and entertaining. Some people were invited because they were good at playing cards, others because they were good at acting, and others because they were good at playing the piano. After all, it was difficult to entertain guests for 3 or 4 days. To this particular house party, Lady Blemley invited Cornelius Appin. People said that he was clever. And, in fact, Cornelius seemed like the name of a clever man. But when he was at the party, Lady Blemley could not understand why people thought he was clever. He said very little. One afternoon it was raining and all the guests were in the living room. Cornelius Appin said, "I have made the most important scientific discovery in the history of the world. I have worked on this particular problem for many years." "What is this fantastic discovery?" asked Sir Wilfrid, another one of Lady Blemley's guests. "I have taught animals how to speak our language, Mike," explained Cornelius. "Do you have an example of your work here?" asked Sir Wilfrid, who obviously did not believe Cornelius. "Yes, I do. Lady Blemley's cat, Tobermory." "Tobermory is my best student," answered Cornelius. "How can we possibly believe," continued Sir Wilfrid, "that you have discovered how to teach animals to talk?" "Well," explained Cornelius, "I have worked on this problem for many years. I have experimented with thousands and thousands of animals. 7 months ago, I began to work with cats. Cats are the perfect animals for my work. They live with us, but they are still like wild animals. And there are cats who are more intelligent than other cats. Tobermory is one of these intelligent cats. In fact, he is a super cat. He is the first animal that I have taught to speak perfectly." All the guests looked at Cornelius. Nobody said a word. They thought he was crazy or a liar. Finally, after a minute or two, Miss Resker said, "I understand. You have taught Tobermory to say and understand very simple sentences like go or come. That's very interesting." "No, no," said Cornelius patiently. "Tittle children learn short sentences first. But Tobermory is a very intelligent animal. I taught him to speak English perfectly and completely. His English is as good as your English." Now everybody was sure that Cornelius was a liar. "I think we should see the cat, and then we can judge for ourselves," suggested Lady Blemley. Sir Wilfrid left the room and went to look for the cat. Everyone began to think that Cornelius was a good ventriloquist. They waited for this interesting show of ventriloquism to begin. A minute later, Sir Wilfrid came back in the room. His face was white. He was obviously very excited. It's true," he shouted. The other guests could see that Sir Wilfrid was telling the truth, and they asked him what had happened. "Well, I found Tobermory sleeping on a chair in the smoking room. I told him to come to the living room immediately. He opened his eyes slowly and looked at me. Then he said, 'I'll come when I want to.' Now go away." I almost fainted. Chapter 2. Some terrible discoveries. Now everybody believed Cornelius. They began to ask him lots of questions. Cornelius smiled. He was very happy with his first success. At that moment, when everybody was asking Cornelius questions, Tobermory walked into the room. None of the guests said a word. They felt embarrassed in front of a talking cat. Finally, the hostess, Lady Blemley, said nervously, "Would you like some milk, Tobermory?" "Yes, I'm a little thirsty," said the cat indifferently. Everyone in the room was shocked, and Lady Blemley's hand shook as she poured Tobermory some milk. "I'm sorry, but I've spilt most of the milk on the carpet," apologized Lady Blemley. "I don't care," responded Tobermory. "It's not my carpet." The room was silent for another minute. Then Miss Resker asked Tobermory if it was difficult to learn to speak. The cat looked at Miss Resker for a minute. Then he looked out the window. It was obvious that he considered Miss Resker's question ridiculous. "What do you think of human intelligence?" asked Mavis Pellington stupidly. "Human intelligence in general, or do you want to know about some particular person?" asked Tobermory. Well, my intelligence. What do you think of my intelligence?" asked Mavis with a nervous laugh. "Well, you put me in an embarrassing position," said Tobermory. But he did not look embarrassed. "Anyway, I'll answer you. When Lady Blemley told Sir Wilfrid that she wanted to invite you to this party, he said, 'Mavis Pellington is the stupidest woman in the world. Why are you inviting her?' Lady Blemley replied, 'Sir Wilfrid, I am inviting her because she is stupid. I have this old car that I want to sell, and Mavis Pellington is the only person stupid enough to buy it.' Lady Blemley, of course, said that Tobermory was a liar. But Mavis Pellington did not believe her. That morning, she had bought Lady Blemley's old car. Major Barfield tried to change the subject. He said, "Tobermory, do you want to tell us about your girlfriend, the striped cat that lives near the stable?" Everyone immediately understood that he had made a terrible mistake. "It is not polite to ask people about their love affairs," replied Tobermory coldly. "Do you want me to talk about what I have seen during this party? I'm sure that you wouldn't like that, would you?" There was a moment of general panic. Almost all the guests had some private love affair. They all thought, if Tobermory says what he has seen, I'll be in trouble. Tobermory's dinner was in 2 hours, but Lady Blemley said, Tobermory, why don't you ask the cook if your dinner's ready? Thanks, responded Tobermory, but I have just had tea. I don't want to die of indigestion. Cats have 9 lives, Tobermory, said Sir Wilfrid, trying to be funny. Possibly, was the answer, but only 1 liver. Lady Blemley, are you going to permit this cat to talk about us with the servants? Said Mrs. Cornet, another guest. The panic was general. Everyone remembered that Tobermory often walked outside their windows. It was obvious that he had seen and heard everything that happened in their bedrooms. Some guests became white with fear. Others, like Odo Finsbury, who was studying to be a minister of the church, ran out of the room. All the guests thought, if Tobermory tells everything he knows, there will be terrible scandals. Finally, Agnes Resker said dramatically, why did I come to this house party? Tobermory had the answer, I know why you came. Yesterday you said to Mrs. Cornet that Lady Blemley's parties were very boring, but the food was delicious. You told her that you came for the good food. In fact, you said that everyone came for the food. That is not true. You are a liar. Mrs. Cornet, tell the truth. Did I say that? Tell the. Then Mrs. Cornet told Bertie Van Ton what you said, continued Tobermory. And he said that Agnes Resker went anywhere she could get free food. And then, fortunately for the guests, at that moment, Tobermory stopped his story. He had seen his enemy, a big yellow tomcat. He jumped out the window and ran after it. All the guests looked at Cornelius angrily. He had caused all this trouble. Do you think Tobermory will teach other cats to talk? They asked Cornelius. It's possible, replied Cornelius. Maybe he has taught his girlfriend, the cat that lives in the stables. But I don't think he has taught any other cats, at least not yet. Lady Blemley, said Mrs. Cornet, I know that you and your husband like Tobermory very much, but he and his friend, the stable cat, must be killed. I have not enjoyed this last half hour either, said Lady Blemley. Yes, it is true that my husband and I like Tobermory very much. Well, we liked him before he learned to talk and tell our secrets. Anyway, I agree that he must be killed as soon as possible. We can put poison in his food, said Sir Wilfrid, and I will go and drown the stable cat. What about my great discovery? Cornelius said with great emotion. I have worked for many years. Why don't you go to the zoo, said Mrs. Cornet, and teach the elephants to talk? Elephants are very intelligent animals, but they do not hide under your chair and they do not sit outside your bedroom window. Cornelius tried to persuade them not to kill Tobermory and destroy all his scientific work. No one listened to him. In fact, many of the guests thought that poison should be put in Cornelius's food. That night at dinner, all the guests were quiet. Lady Blemley tried to create conversation, but no one talked. They were all watching Tobermory's bowl. Inside the bowl was some delicious meat and poison. But Tobermory still did not come back. After dinner, still no Tobermory. The servants came and announced that the window of the kitchen was open as usual for Tobermory. 9 o'clock, no Tobermory. 10 o'clock, no Tobermory. At 11 o'clock, one of the guests got up to go to bed. Before leaving the room, he said, Tobermory probably went to the local newspaper to tell everything he has seen and heard during this house party. Good night. It was not a good night. The next morning, all the guests asked the servants the same question, and the servants gave the guests the same answer. No, Tobermory has not returned. Breakfast was even more depressing than dinner the night before. But before it was over, the gardener walked into the room with Tobermory's dead body. His enemy, the big tomcat, killed him, explained the gardener. Tobermory was Cornelius Appin's first and only successful student. A few weeks later, Lady Blemley read in the newspaper that an elephant in the Dresden Zoological Garden had killed an Englishman. The newspaper said that the elephant was usually gentle and calm, but that the Englishman had apparently provoked it. The name of the Englishman was C. Appin. As one of Lady Blemley's guests said, if he was trying to teach that elephant German irregular verbs, he deserved to die. Chapter 1. Enemies. One winter night, a man stood in a forest in the Carpathian Mountains. He was carrying a rifle, and it seemed that he was waiting and listening for some wild animal. But Ulrich von Gradwitz was looking for a human enemy. Ulrich had a lot of land. This land was full of all different kinds of wild animals, but he always guarded carefully one particular area of this land. It was mountainous, and not many animals lived there, so why did Ulrich guard this land so carefully? Many years ago, Ulrich's grandfather and a neighbor, Heinrich Znaim, had both wanted the same portion of land. They went to court, and Ulrich's grandfather won the case. Heinrich Znaim, however, did not accept the court's decision. He continued to hunt on the land. The two families began fighting. Ulrich and Heinrich Znaim's grandson Georg hated each other passionately. When they were boys, they wanted to kill each other. Now they were men, and they each wanted the other to suffer. This night, Ulrich and his forest guards were out looking for Georg and his men. It was a stormy night, and the wind was strong. Ulrich saw deer running from the contested area of land. Normally, during a storm, deer stay in one place, so he knew that his enemy was near. He told his guards to wait at the top of a hill and walked off into the woods and down the hill by himself. He listened carefully for the sound of branches breaking. I hope, he said to himself, I will meet Georg Znaim tonight man to man. If I kill him here, no one will ever know. At that moment, as Ulrich walked around the trunk of a gigantic tree, he came face to face with Georg Znaim. The enemies stared at each other for a long, silent moment. Each man had a rifle in his hand. Each man had hate in his heart, and each man had murder in his thoughts. But it is difficult for a civilized man to shoot his neighbor in cold blood. They had to say something. At this moment, however, the wind blew particularly hard, and there was a crash. A gigantic tree fell on top of the two men. Ulrich von Gradwitz could not move. One arm was probably broken and the other arm was partly under the trunk. His legs were under a large branch. His face was badly cut, and he had to blink several times to move the blood from his eyes. Almost next to him lay Georg Znaim, alive and fighting to move. Ulrich could see that he was in almost the same condition. Ulrich was both happy to be alive and angry at his situation. Georg was almost blind from the blood that flowed into his eyes from cuts on his forehead. He stopped moving for a moment to listen, and then he laughed angrily. "So you weren't killed," said Georg, "but you're caught anyway." "That's very funny." Ulrich von Gradwitz caught in his stolen forest. Now that is real justice. And he laughed again, angrily and ironically. "I'm caught in my own forest," replied Ulrich. "When my men come to release me, you'll be sorry that you were caught poaching here in my forest." Georg was silent for a moment. Then he answered quietly, "Are you sure that your men will find you first? I have men too in the forest tonight. They're near, and they'll find me first. When they pull me out, perhaps by accident, of course, they'll push the trunk on top of you. Your men will find you dead under this tree. Then, because I am a gentleman, I shall send my condolences to your family." "That's a good idea," said Ulrich angrily and ironically. "I told my men to follow me after 10 minutes. 7 of those 10 minutes have gone by already, and when they come, I'll remember your idea. Only I can't decently send condolences to your family. After all, you were poaching on my land." "Good," growled Georg. "Good. We shall fight to the death, just you and I and our guards with no interlopers. Death and damnation to you, Ulrich von Gradwitz. The same to you, Georg Znaim, forest thief, poacher." But both men knew that it was a question of chance which man's guards would come first. Chapter 2. Friends. Now the two men had stopped trying to get free. Ulrich tried with his partially free arm to pull out his wine flask. After a few minutes, he finally succeeded. Then, after another few minutes, he succeeded in pulling off the stopper. He drank a little. It was truly wonderful. In this cold weather, the wine warmed his body. Then he looked with pity at Georg, who was fighting not to scream in pain. "Can you reach the flask if I throw it to you?" Ulrich asked suddenly. "There's good wine in it, and there's no reason why we should suffer. Let us drink, even if tonight one of us dies." "No, I can't see anything because I have dried blood on my eyes," said Georg. "And in any case, I don't drink wine with an enemy." Ulrich was silent for a few minutes, listening to the sound of the wind. An idea was gradually formulating in his brain. This idea grew clearer every time he looked at Georg fighting against his pain. In the pain that Ulrich was feeling, the old hate was beginning to die. "Neighbor," Ulrich said, "you can do what you want if your men come first." It was a fair agreement. "But I've changed my mind. If my men come first, they will help you first as though you were my guest. We have fought all our lives over this stupid portion of forest. Tonight, lying here thinking, I have come to the conclusion that we have been fools. What is so important about this portion of forest? Neighbor, if you help me end this fight, I'll ask you to be my friend." Georg Znaim was silent for a long time. Ulrich began to think that he had fainted because of the pain. Then Georg spoke slowly. "Everyone would be shocked if we rode into town together. Nobody can remember a Znaim and a von Gradwitz talking to each other as friends. And there will be peace among the forest guards and their families if we end the fight tonight. And if we choose to make peace among our families, there is no one who will interfere. No interlopers from outside. You could come to my house at Christmas, and I could come to your castle on other holidays. I would never hunt on your land if you didn't invite me, and you could come and hunt ducks in my marshes. There is nobody around here who can stop us if we want to make peace. I have always thought that I wanted to hate you, but I changed my mind when you offered me your wine flask. Ulrich von Gradwitz, I will be your friend." Then they were both silent. They were thinking about the wonderful changes this new peace would bring. In the cold, dark forest with the wind blowing, they waited for the help that would free both of them. And each man wanted his men to come first so that he could be the first to help his new friend. Then the wind stopped for a moment and Ulrich spoke. "Let's shout for help," he said. "Now that the wind has stopped, they might hear us." "It will be difficult in this forest," replied Georg, "but let's try." "Together, then." The two men shouted together for help. "Together again," said Ulrich a few minutes later. "I heard something that time, I think," said Ulrich. "I only heard the wind," said Georg. There was silence again for a few minutes, and then Ulrich shouted joyfully, "I can see people coming through the forest." Both men shouted again. "They can hear us. They've stopped. Now they've seen us. They're running down the hill toward us," cried Ulrich. "How many are there?" asked Georg, who could not see because of the dried blood on his eyes. "I can't see distinctly," said Ulrich. 9 or 10. "Then they're your men," said Georg. "I only had 7 men with me tonight. They are running quickly." "What brave men," said Ulrich gladly. "Are they your men?" asked Georg. "Are they your men?" he repeated impatiently, as Ulrich did not answer. "No," said Ulrich with a laugh. But it was the idiotic laugh of a man who is very afraid. "Who are they?" asked George quickly, trying to see what the other man would have preferred not to see. "Wolves,"